Namo tassa bhagavato arahato sama sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato sama sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato sama sambuddhassa. So, hello everyone. Welcome to Basics Discussion Circle Meditation. My name is Travis. I facilitate this group. So, I think for tonight, we'll just do some normal breath meditation. And I might work in a little bit of working with any kind of pain that we might have in the body. Just a little bit. We don't have to push ourselves or anything like that, but it can be useful to kind of change the dynamic between our mind and our experience of pain a little bit. And the meditation's a really good tool for that. And when we have pain in the body, or when we have this chronic pain, the recurring pain, it has a way of wearing on us. And through the meditation, we can kind of, by adjusting that relationship, in many ways, it adjusts the intensity of the pain. Because a lot of the intensity coming from physical pain is actually being fueled from our mental resistance to the physical pain. So that's what we'll do. We'll do some breathing through the body, maybe focus on some areas that have been giving us issues lately, some areas that might be stiff or painful. Then we'll just go from there. We'll see. So we'll get right into it. Closing the eyes and taking 3 deep breaths slowly. Noticing if deep breathing feels good for the body. And if it does, you can keep on breathing in this way. If it doesn't, you can switch things up. Maybe even deeper still or more shallow. Heavier or lighter. In long, out short. In short, out long. Just playing around. Finding whatever kind of breath feels the most energizing or the most calming. And then maintaining it for a while. This kind of experimentation with the breath is really valuable because it grants direct insight into how the way that we breathe influences our experience of the present moment, and how changing our rhythm and texture of breath changes our experience of the moment from within. But if this experimentation just seems too involved right now, you can even just pose the question in the mind as to what kind of breathing would be the most calming or the most energizing, and then just watch how the breath responds. Once you've found this rhythm and texture of breath, whatever feels best for the body in this moment, you can just kind of allow it to continue and settle into it, settling into the body and settling into the moment. Aware of the breath as it flows in and as it flows out. As you maintain this awareness of breath, you can sensitize yourself to it further, noticing if there's any sense of constriction or tension around the breathing process. Any sense of forcing the breath in or squeezing the breath out. See if you can soften around that process, relaxing that tension all the way through the in breath and all the way through the out. Allowing it to flow unobstructed. Noticing the shift in the sensation of breath once this tension is relaxed. And we can follow the same process throughout the body. The same sensation of relaxing tension. And a good way to go about this is to imagine moving the breath through the body. Breathing in, the breath can travel up to the forehead and the area around the eyes. Dissolving away any tension or tightness there. Relaxing the eyes, softening the forehead. Breathing out, keeping that tension relaxed. allowing this breath awareness to continue flowing from the forehead over the surface of the scalp, relaxing tension as we breathe in. And then this breath awareness gliding down the spine as we breathe out. From the base of the skull. Just like warm water washing over the skull and down the spine, dissolving tension. Guiding breath awareness from the base of the skull down the arms, relaxing the neck and the shoulders, washing away tension. with the face and the scalp, the spine and the arms soothed, tension reduced. You can turn our awareness towards anywhere in the body that as we focus here, there's a sense of ease, a sense of refreshment, a physical sensation that feels refreshing or comforting, pleasant. And it might be very subtle, but just as there's pockets of warmth and coolness throughout the body, there's also pockets of sensation that feel better than others, and pockets of sensation that feel worse than others. For now, we'll focus on these areas that feel pleasant or refreshing. And it could be anywhere, the chest, the tips of the fingers and the toes, the top of the head, or anywhere else. And when you found this little area of a pleasant sensation, see if you can imagine breathing into the sensation, fueling this pleasant sensation, allowing it to expand as it will, like stoking embers with each breath. Breathing in, fueling this pleasant sensation. Breathing out, allowing sensation to expand. And once this pleasant sensation feels a bit more pronounced than it did initially, this might be a bit tricky, and don't worry if it's not something we can do in this moment. See if we can allow this pleasant sensation to travel, to be able to move this pleasant sensation within the body and kind of gently surround an unpleasant sensation, an area that may be in pain or discomfort. Not trying to send this pleasant sensation into its core, but the area around it where it's not that intense. Just continuing to maintain this pleasant sensation on the periphery of this unpleasant sensation. If you notice the unpleasant sensation lessening, you can slowly bring that pleasant sensation further into the center of it, never forcing, never rushing. Then you can, for a moment here, just return to the sensation of the breath coming in through the nose or the mouth and down into the lungs and the stomach. Taking a few good deep breaths. Gradually opening the eyes when ready and stretching if needed. Never in a rush to leave the meditation. So, as always, if anyone would like to share how that experience of meditation was for them, or if y'all have any questions or comments about the meditation, I'd be happy to hear it. We have the live chat either over here or down there, something like that. So, this might I think this is the first time, at least the first time in quite a while, that we've worked directly with pleasure and pain in the meditation. It's really beneficial, really useful, but maybe I'll do it a little more often. I hopefully y'all found it beneficial. Uh, what's interesting about, and I have some images in my head, and we'll see how they translate, right? But what's interesting with this relationship of pleasure and pain is both pleasure and pain within the body aren't necessarily isolated incidents, right? They're not isolated occurrences. This whole body is a very connected system. When we have pain in the knee, there's not just pain happening locally in the knee. There's signals being sent from the knee up into the brain, and then we're registering pain, and then signals are sent back down saying, okay, let's inflame this area to protect it from whatever. So signals are being sent back and forth. So what's really cool is you can kind of think of the image that comes to mind for me, right? When we have any kind of pain in the body, it's kind of like there's this massive pain, right? But there's all these channels feeding that pain. That which that's kind of how it feels. Maybe that's not physiologically how that's working. But that's kind of how the experience of it feels when you investigate it. And I think that feeling of those channels is pretty much the pain sending signals to the brain sending signals back to the pain. Um, we don't have to get scientific with it or anything like that, but that's kind of my assumption. And so what it feels like is that there's kind of these supply chains going to this pain. And oftentimes when we're trying to work with pain in the meditation, whenever we're trying to work with anything in the meditation, the knee-jerk reaction tends to be one of two things. One is when something's uncomfortable, we turn away from it completely and try to push it out of our mind. And then the other is the exact opposite. We try to dive in headfirst straight into the source, biting off more than we can chew. That's just kind of human nature, right? So finding this balance and also realizing that because there's these supply chains, the source of the pain isn't necessarily, or the base of the pain isn't necessarily in that center where it hurts the most. The source of that pain is kind of these supply chains supplying the energy, attention, awareness to that pain. So the image that comes to mind for me, if you think of like two armies facing each other, right? Two groups of armies. And I can use the analogy like within the knee, right? So you have one army, the enemy army, the unpleasant sensation, setting up a base camp in the knee. But in order for that base camp to maintain itself, it needs a supply chain that needs to be able to have rations delivered to it. It needs to be able to send information out of it, to request the rations, to get back up, whatever it may be. So you have this pain in the knee, right? And that's the enemy army. And then you have this pleasant sensation, which first, when you're working with a pleasant sensation, within my experience, the best way to go about it is to find an area in the body like we just did, where there's a subtle pleasant sensation, and then nourish it for a bit. Gather your troops, nourish your troops. And then you send your army, this pleasant sensation, off to battle the enemy army. The problem is this trying to charge right into the heart of the enemy that's been set up a lot longer than we've gathered our troops. The pleasant sensation tends to get massacred immediately. But if we can be skillful with it, and instead of going straight into the heart of enemy territory, we can surround the enemy. We can cut off these supply chains. If we can gain control of the supply chains, then our troops, our pleasant sensation, has access to them, has access to these kind of channels of sensation in the body, right? And then what ends up happening is, because since we control the supply chains, the enemy troops don't have access to supplies. Their food reserves dwindle and they starve out. And that's the same thing that we do here in the meditation, is when we can surround an unpleasant sensation with this, we can kind of wrap it in this pleasant sensation, where it's not so close that the pleasant sensation starts getting burnt by the unpleasant sensation, right? If we can control those kind of channels, if we can cut them off, then that gentle enwrapping of the unpleasant sensation with pleasant sensation starts to starve it out. And our attention focused on the pleasant sensation gives power to the pleasant sensation. And because we're focused on a pleasant sensation, the opposite, an unpleasant sensation, becomes far less noticeable. And therefore our attention's not focused on it, and it starts to starve out. So that's kind of what we worked with here, kind of what we applied here. Apologies if that analogy is maybe gruesome, but I think it's applicable. Sherry shared, that was really interesting. It actually worked for me. I was able to expand the nice sensation to a larger area, and it did help to move the pleasure into the pain area. I'm really glad to hear that, Sherry. That's really good. I wasn't sure, because I don't think I haven't necessarily led this type of meditation in this way before. You've been sitting with me for a while though, so we've kind of built up those skills of being able to transfer a sensation to different areas, work with them. I was a bit reserved to lead it in that way because there's kind of a lot of steps, and if someone hasn't practiced some of the other ones, it's a lot of new things all at once. But yeah, I'm glad you found it useful. The I always talk about, or I very often talk about right effort and tuning our effort to the correct level, and that's kind of what this practice is all about. We're not we're not charging straight into the heart of the pain. We're not trying to uproot the pain with sheer force of will or with neutral sensation. It's far more effective to combat an unpleasant sensation with a pleasant sensation than it is to combat an unpleasant sensation with neutral awareness. The right tool for the right job. Neutral awareness is really beneficial for an unpleasant mind state, but it's not necessarily that beneficial for an unpleasant sensation. Um, so being able to figure out what works when is really helpful. But yeah, that's it's kind of what I had for tonight. This being able to work with pain in the body, and as with anything that I lead here and suggest here, when something's unpleasant, we don't go right into it. We try to find the outermost edge of it and work inward. It's very helpful because a lot of these, whether it's an unpleasant physical sensation or unpleasant mental sensation, they can seem really daunting, really overwhelming, um, and really solid. But the thing is, I was going to say they're not solid, but the thing is, nothing is solid. Everything is an aggregate of a trillion little pieces, right? Whether it's a physical sensation being an aggregate of 1,000 little physical sensations building up into either a pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral sensation, or it's a mental phenomena that has trillions of little thought worlds, belief systems, assumptions, perceptions that are feeding into this one large things that we look at. Things aren't solid. They're a lot more like a school of fish. Fish travel in a school to seem bigger and scarier, but independently, they're not that scary. And if we can take that kind of approach with things that arise in the mind or sensations that arise in the body, they can seem really scary, but if we break them down, they're really not as intimidating as we thought they were. And one of the best ways to do this is this transference of sensation, working with sensation, moving it. Yeah. Sherry said, that's a great analogy, actually. Cutting off the supply chain is a helpful way to think about it. The meditation itself was surprisingly intuitive for me. Good. I'm glad. Why Hill said, thank you, Travis, for helping with seeing a different perspective. Glad to help. It's these types of the meditation for me. The practice of meditation is like almost entirely a combination of adjusting our perceptions and adjusting our sensations. Working with those two things as a base, you can make a lot of stuff arise in the mind and in the body, and you can make a lot of stuff subside in the mind and in the body. And learning how to adjust our perception, learning how to recognize which perceptions are helpful and which perceptions are harmful, and being able to adjust our perspective to be more inclined towards being helpful towards what we're doing instead of kind of having all of this baggage that we bring into the moment that's hampering our experience of the present moment. We have so many perspectives and beliefs that we've held on to that we picked up. And I say this all the time, some random perspectives that we picked up when we were 3 years old, 4 years old, 5 years old, something that someone said to us one time, and as a small child, it just got integrated into our mind. And then we never go back and do the spring cleaning of perception, spring cleaning of going back and checking if these perceptions have a value, if they still have a value to us, if we believe them, if we don't. And we just kind of operate off of them without really checking in with how we feel of them, with them, or checking in if they hold up to examination. So it's just really beneficial to play with perception, play with perspective. This same the same method that we used tonight, and if at any point anyone has any questions or anything, feel free to ask them. But the same method that we did tonight works with a lot of different things. Maybe I'll talk a little bit about mental phenomena and how this same method applies to mental phenomena through actual example, right? So in the same way that we rallied our troops with this pleasant sensation, and then we surrounded the enemy encampment, cut off the supply chains, and then starved out the unpleasant sensation, the same, relatively same exact process works on a mind state. And this process, stripped of what we specifically did, stripped down to the formula, I guess you would say, would be identify what the problem area is. In this case, it was an unpleasant sensation. Generate an antidote to that problem area, so generate its opposite. In this case, that was a pleasant sensation. Look after, cultivate, and grow that antidote as far as you're able to within that moment, and then kind of send that antidote to the problem area or to the periphery of the problem area. The same thing works within the mind. Say we have a persistent thought of anger or revenge or anything like that. We can notice the context, the content of the thoughts, but we can also notice the way that those thoughts, the physical response, the sensational response to those thoughts and how they feel, right? Because all thoughts, all emotions have a corresponding physical sensation, physical thumbprint to them. And it's different for everyone. So if we have a thought of anger, right, or revenge, then we've identified that the problem, the discomfort that we're currently experiencing is anger or revenge. And then we can generate the antidote to that, which would be, for anger, it would be goodwill or loving kindness. For revenge, it would be forgiveness. We can find where in the body best corresponds to those sensations. Loving kindness, goodwill, forgiveness tends to work best within the heart space. But if that's where the anger and revenge thoughts are centered, then focus somewhere else. But we give rise to we have these unskillful mental states, so we give rise to these skillful mental states, these opposites to them. We cultivate them as much as we can in that moment. And then we kind of, by tuning into how they physically feel in the body, while maintaining that mind state, that pleasant mind state, that skillful mind state, we can move the physical sensation to wherever the physical sensation of the unpleasantness is, of the unskillful mind state. And we can dissolve that away in much the same way. Maybe that, I don't know if that's a little bit too abstract, but because the skillful mind state and the pleasant sensation are interdependent with each other, by moving the pleasant sensation, the mind state has to follow because they're interdependent on each other. So we might not be sure how to move a thought around in the body, but we can move a sensation. And if that sensation is linked with that thought, those thoughts, those skillful emotions will move along with sensation. And then we can again, surround the enemy encampment and starve out the thoughts of anger or the thoughts of revenge. And then slowly shrink our encirclement until it's extinguished, much the same way that we did with the pain in the body. Does anyone have any questions or comments? I have maybe a few more things that I'd like to talk about with regards to pain. I just wanted to apply it to mental phenomena, but the intended focus of the talk tonight is physical pain. Predominantly because I've been having issues with my knees lately and it's really uncomfortable. So instead of trying to, like I said, turn away from it and shut that out, I figured I'd give a talk about it because then I have to directly address it. And then hopefully my relationship with the pain is better for the next few days. Otherwise, I'll feel like a hypocrite for giving the talk about dealing with pain and then not dealing with the pain. So one of the things that's really helpful, and it's something my teacher suggests that I found really helpful, is we have when we have chronic pain, right? In those moments, say it's chronic back pain, chronic knee pain, whatever it is, um, whatever it is, we're not just experiencing the pain in that moment. We're also, through mental anguish, we're experiencing every second of pain that we've had prior, every second of that chronic pain that we've had prior kind of gets mentally compounded into our experience of that pain in that moment. And that's why in that sense, the pain that we're experiencing in that moment is actually is a lot more intense through mental inflation than the pain itself actually genuinely is. So we apply, instead of taking the pain moment by moment, like chopping the moments, oh, this is a fresh moment of pain. This is the first time I'm experiencing this pain. This pain isn't the same pain as the last trillion moments of pain that this area has been in, right? So having that kind of perspective of not compounding all of the times that my knees have hurt and compounding and compressing it and putting it in the knee in the moment now, instead I can look at, well, what's actually going on in this moment in this area of pain. And that helps tremendously. And that's kind of, these work in tandem, right? This giving rise to this pleasant physical sensation and then surrounding the unpleasant sensation and then kind of slowly dissolving it, starving it out like that. That's predominantly helping relieve our actual experience of the pain in the moment itself. Because we're kind of mentally making the body soothe the physical nerves. Not a doctor, but we're making the body kind of soothe the nerves. We're changing our relationship with the pain. But then at the same time, if we can check in on the mental side to make sure we're not compounding all of this extra unnecessary pain down into this moment, it's really helpful. And I'll kind of close on this, but I often talk about how when we look at something, if we can expand it out, just like the school of fish analogy, all that kind of stuff, if we can expand that brief moment out and see the bigger picture and how it's a bunch of components kind of layered on each other, but it's not actually a solid thing, it makes it a lot easier to deal with a lot of these things that arise. So yeah. White Hill said, yes, it is like this back pain has me captive. That compound thought process is so on point. I got to work on this. Yeah, I'm glad it's relatable. I do it a lot. Um, so yeah, and then the one other thing that I found helpful is another suggestion from my teacher. He says instead of looking at the pain as when the pain's arising, instead of looking at the pain, instead of having this kind of perception that the pain's coming at you, the pain's coming towards you, it's to instead try to hold the perception in mind that the pain is going away from you, meaning that instead of seeing the pain as building moment to moment, because though it's chronic pain, it's not constant necessarily. It kind of ebbs and flows, right? I mean, at least my own chronic pain does. And I have moments where it doesn't really hurt that much, and then eventually it starts hurting again, right? So each moment that it's here is one moment that it's closer to being gone. Instead of seeing it as one more moment that it's persisting, having that perception of it's one more moment less that it's here for, like one moment less of its duration. So instead of seeing the pain coming at you and feeling kind of attacked by it, we can have the perception that the longer that the pain's here, it's going away. It's going away from us. It's not coming at us. So that's something else that I found really helpful. I think that's it for tonight. We are at time. Yeah. So Sherry shared, this is such an important class. Maybe Jeff can share in the newsletter to highlight for people currently experiencing pain. Could provide a lot of relief for those suffering. I'll mention it to him. I hope it does provide some relief. With that, we will close with a dedication of merit. If comfortable, please join palms. May any merit gained from tonight's meditation and discussion be dedicated to all those who suffer at this time. May all beings in all directions, without limit or exception, be healthy, safe, joyful, and at ease. May we all be healthy, safe, joyful, and at ease. Metta karuna mudita upeka sangha teya cetasa chaturisam bharatva viharati Sambhabudaro bhavena Sambhadamaro bhavena Sambhasangharo bhavena Sote hantu nirantaram. So good night, everyone. Enjoy the rest of your night. I'll see y'all next week.